notice when I'm talking to people, whenever a common theme emerges, or whenever I notice that several people are either talking about the same thing or asking the same type of question, you know, because they're curious about it, they're not sure about it, or they hold it as a belief of some sort. And what I want to talk about here is I've had several men ask me or say to me, why is it that women like bad boys, right? What's the attraction there? What's going on there? And you know, of course, the men who were asking me that were probably the type of men that most of us would call nice men, right? And I told him, I said, well, it's probably not what you think, right? And it's not really that we like bad boys, so to speak, but it's more about the behavior that they tend to portray and how that interacts or appeals to our femininity, okay? And I do want to say, before we get too far into this, a couple of things, and I'm going to try and just hit points here because otherwise this will get too long, is that I want to try and discourage people from taking the attitude that when we're talking about sexual behavior or sexuality or sensuous nature, that playful eroticness of us, that we keep it in perspective as far as seeing it as beautiful, seeing it as erotic and pleasurable to have, to be, and how it really creates a very sexy, loving, exciting type experience between lovers, and not have a tendency to jump over into the arena that wants to look at everything through the lens of being vulgar or profane or disgusting or sick, or try to resist that because our society is famous for it, and it's caused all kinds of problems with our sexuality as a result. So this is about the beautiful aspect of being in an intimate relationship and really cultivating the intimacy of that and making it a very beautiful experience, okay? No other area of our life do we have the possibility for experiencing more pleasure than in this area of our life. And I also want to say quickly that our sexual nature is probably what we call one of the most core areas of our life. And what this means is that in this area we come across more problems with self-esteem, with confidence, with judgments that we hold against ourselves, with how we feel about our body, with what we've been taught about our sexuality, religious dogma, bad experiences in the past. I mean, all kinds of things immediately come to the surface whenever we start talking about sexuality, which means that this is an excellent area of our life to work on, that if we can create change in this area, step through fears, release inhibitions in this area of our life, it automatically and simultaneously affects all the other areas of our life. Because this area of our life is very much about the self. It's very much about us and how we feel about ourselves. Not to mention that the second chakra of the body, which is the chakra of love, sexuality, relationships, creativity, and how we get a sense of personal power. So as far as the reason we don't create or express ourselves more freely in the world, in all areas of our life, is because we've got all kinds of inhibitions around being able to express freely, and they usually have something to do with feeling vulnerable, feeling like we're putting ourselves out there and we're going to get, you know, chopped off, or we really kind of put ourselves out there and then we meet nothing but criticism, something like that. But our ability to express sexually and our ability to express creatively are very much linked. So by opening up our sexuality is best done with our creativity, and simultaneously enhances our creative ability as a general rule of thumb, okay? And one of the other things I want to point out is in spiritual sciences, we start off with a model, what we call the fundamental level of reality, which is the energetic level. And the reason we do this is such a beautiful model to use when anytime we're looking at behavior, is because it gives us a nice neutral model where we can watch how things behave that doesn't have the human drama attached to it, doesn't have our beliefs and our judgments and our, you know, all this little crappy stuff that goes on inside of our head that clouds the issue, right? We look through a dark lens and we can only see so much, but it allows us to look at it just a very clean, neutral model that shows us, demonstrates the behavior that we ourselves participate in, okay? And this picture, of course, is about the true in nature. The one that exists in a state of polarity is the masculine and the feminine. And I also want to point out that whenever I use the term masculine, male, man, or feminine, woman, female, I'm talking about the general aspects or attributes that are associated with the electromagnetic aspect of energy. The masculine aspect is electric, which is the positive, assertive, expansive part of the equation. The feminine aspect, or the negative, which is the pull in, the magnetic quality that draws to, okay? So, and of course they exist in polarity, which means they move back and forth, which means they stimulate each other. One stimulates the other, which stimulates the other, and they excite each other into what we call an elevated state of anticipation. So, but the other thing I want to point out too is that just because a man is a man doesn't mean that he is dominantly masculine. Each individual, men have masculine and feminine energy in them, as well as females have masculine and feminine energy in them also. And a male can be dominant in feminine energy, which doesn't necessarily mean he's gay, although it may, but it just means that his demeanor, his general behavior, his basic perceptions tend to embrace more feminine qualities. And the same thing goes for a woman. A woman can basically be dominant masculine and tend to embrace her masculinity, her, you know, take charge, assertive type attitude. And the only thing that matters when we're talking about sexual behavior and sexual interaction is that opposites get matched, okay? If a male has predominantly feminine energy, all he needs to do is make sure he hooks up with a woman who has predominantly masculine energy, and they're going to have a pretty stimulating relationship. And the same thing applies for a woman who is dominantly masculine. If she hooks up with a man who's dominantly feminine, they're going to have a pretty passionate relationship. When two of the same dominants come into a relationship, what typically happens is they have the experience of being best friends, of being really comfortable with each other, with being able to really talk to each other, and they got that companionship is pretty good, because it's kind of like two women who are best friends, or it's kind of like two guys that are best friends. But unfortunately, when they go into the bedroom, it's not good. Not a whole lot takes place, and if it does, it's only in the very beginning of the relationship, and the longer the relationship goes, the quicker and the more permanently the sex part of it dies out. So nature has designed us for the masculine aspect or quality, and the feminine as the shaft and the shank, or the womb, so to speak. We fit together, and one energy provokes, antagonizes, and excites the other one, which provokes. We're basically meant to excite each other, arouse each other, and engage in a very back and forth playfulness that has kind of a lighthearted quality that's also very erotic and sexy, because this is the area of our life where we can really have that part of ourself, right? And the beauty of archetypes, or the beauty of different aspects, says that we want to be able to have all aspects of our nature, not just a couple of them, right? Like, most of us get pretty good at the work thing, and most of us get pretty good at the parenting thing, and, you know, or we do pretty good with the marriage as far as like the house and the, you know, the running things goes. But we also want to embrace that part of us that's sexy sensuous and erotic and playful and enticing, and we want to have that part of ourselves too. So we want to have the lover relationship in our life. And sometimes we know how to do this and sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's natural in the beginning of a relationship and then it kind of just slowly goes away and we're trying to recapture it. Sometimes we've never ever been able to do this because we've got so many limiting beliefs and so many hang-ups about our body and about our vulnerability and about, you know, exposing ourselves and all that type of stuff that we've never really been able to. Or we've got judgments that say if I'm sensuous and sexy, then that means I'm trashy and sleazy and, you know. So we got different kinds of judgments about ourselves that prevent us from having those type of experiences of ourselves. So, but anyway, so what I want to go into is because we only learn by doing, right? So it's really about how do we bring certain things into practice as a way of developing certain abilities or certain qualities in ourselves and practice them to the point where we start getting comfortable with them. And so I want to go into a couple of behaviors or a couple of things to kind of focus on and pay attention to that will enhance or play a part in being very sensuous and very sexy in what might otherwise be kind of ordinary situations, right? Because the other thing that I want to point out is that sex is not something that is necessarily about intercourse or an orgasm, and it's certainly not something that only takes place in the bedroom after 10 o'clock. Sex, the sexual act, the dance, the playful flirtiness that goes on is something that we engage in like in a routine basis or constantly, maybe throughout the day, that just is, it's like a gesture, right? That has that, hey baby, you know, especially if we're parents or, you know, we're used to kind of being a certain way, to be able to have those little fleeting moments of where we're being something else, so to speak. So, but so anyway, and keep in mind, guys. Okay, I want to say this because this goes to the bad boy thing. Keep in mind that women love romance. Okay, now a lot of men don't know what that means, or they're confused by it, or they kind of know what it means, but they're not real sure. Romance really says adventure. It says a kind of leading dialogue that kind of like playfully puts clues out and kind of does little things along the way that's all leading towards or building into a climax or building into a peak state, okay? But romance is kind of like an adventurous quality that we bring to the sexual act. That can include fantasy, it can include play acting, it can include you know, flirtatious behavior that kind of builds up to the actual act. So just keep that in mind when you hear women like romance and you go, oh God, I gotta buy her flowers and take her out to dinner, right? So, but okay, practice number one. And keep in mind that you have to, that whenever we're practicing new behavior, it feels a little weird at first. And some of these things you might feel stupid doing. Other ones you won't feel stupid at all. You really like them. But just keep in mind that we have to, when we're trying to be different ways and we're trying to create new ways of being, at first it feels awkward. We feel weird. We feel like we're not ourselves. I've heard people say, well, I don't feel authentic. You know, what that really means is I'm not comfortable being like this. I'm not used to feeling myself like this, and I don't know what to do exactly. So, but first thing is to concentrate on or being able to intentionally create certain types of looks in your eyes, so that when you look at somebody, you're aware of what your eyes are saying. Okay, we have a certain quality to the look or the way we look at people that when they connect with us, there is a definite message in that look. Okay, and practice being able to intentionally create certain types of looks that send very definite messages. Okay, and one of the best ways to do this A lot of these behaviors, one of the best ways to do is go in your bathroom, shut the door if you got other people in with you, and look in the mirror. Practice in front of a mirror. Practice certain body, how you're holding yourself, how you're being, and keep practicing it until you pull it off or until you get it where you think it's good, and then practice being that way so that your body kind of gets trained into it, and so you kind of get used to it, and you can say, okay, whenever I'm feeling this way, this is what I'm communicating, or this is what I'm conveying in my body language. Another one is to pay attention to posture. Okay, there's a very definite difference between masculine posture and feminine posture. And some of these are going to sound like puns, but they're really more like analogies. Okay, a masculine posture is very erect, very straight, very firm. It has kind of like a sense of power. They kind of like own their space, so to speak. They usually are very like stable, confident. There's nothing sexier than a confident man, okay? Because in order to pursue and certainly woo and win over a woman, he's got to have confidence, because if he doesn't, the first time he thinks he's being rejected, he's going to freak out and back down, right? So, but is to stand and, the shoulders back, the chest part out, the head back, in a very open in the front, not, you don't want to do this type stuff or look away. The other thing is eye contact. And I'm not talking about, if it's a cultural thing where people don't like being looked in the eyes, but for the most part, a masculine trait is direct eye contact. And not where you're staring somebody down, or trying to intimidate them, but where you're connecting, and you're very calm and you're very stable in that connection, but where you're not afraid to connect. You're not afraid to be completely open, and I don't want to say vulnerable, because you're not really vulnerable, but you give the appearance of not hiding, shying away, closing down, being afraid at all. Okay, men want to be powerful. They want to be strong. Okay, feminine behavior is typically more relaxed. They typically kind of, relax one leg. They might kind of swing at the hips sometimes when they're talking. They tend to be more animated than men, not all the time, but a lot. Or they tend to use a lot of head gestures, or when they talk, they use their hands, or they just frequently touch their body when they're talking. Women are very physical. We're very body oriented, whereas men are more in their head. Women are in their bodies. So we tend to be very comfortable, and we tend to kind of do this kind of stuff a lot. So anyway, keep that in mind.